Okay, hello YouTube. This is going to be a recap of Game 11, and what everybody at this point should know was the final game of the match between Ian Nepomniachtchi and Magnus Carlsen. Nepomniachtchi in this game had the white pieces, and really this was a must-win game. You've got white, and you really just need to win this game because if you don't win with the white pieces, it's just going to be very difficult to do anything else at this point moving forward. And I think the game started out pretty good. It started out with e4, and after pawn to e4, we have e5 from Magnus, which is his go-to. Knight f3, knight c6, and we have bishop c4. So he's avoiding the Ruy Lopez, but his actual intention is to go ahead and just play the Ruy Lopez anyway, but just kind of avoid the theory. So we have knight f6, and then we have kind of the normal move at the GM level here, which is d3. And there's basically, for those of you who have seen some of my videos on the Italian game, in the two knights defense, we have basically the three main options are d3, knight g5, and d4 are basically the three main moves against knight f6. I would say on the club level, I know you're all screaming, why aren't you playing the fried liver? Why aren't you playing knight g5 if you want to play for a win? On the club level, this is a whole lot of fun because usually you get to play the fried liver where you get to sacrifice material with knight f7 and you get to go crazy, and this is a lot of fun. On the Grandmaster level, this isn't nearly as much fun. The move knight a5 is played almost like obligatory on that level, and these positions are just very difficult for white. So typically, white just kind of avoids knight g5, although, I mean, it is something kind of worth exploring. Nakamura played some interesting games where he was retreating this bishop instantly to bishop d3, which was kind of a new move. And of course, Kasparov hazarded this on occasion and tried basically the old main line, which was just, bringing this to e5. And Fischer was known to try the old Steinitz idea of bringing this knight back to h3, which has kind of fallen out of favor. It's not considered so great. But for the most part, on the GM level, people just don't like Black's initiative after sacrificing this pawn, and they just find White's positions just very difficult to play. And just, White has this extra pawn, but he hangs back all game, and he's just kind of suffering, just trying to keep this extra pawn. Pretty much no matter which variation you pick, you're going to be suffering for the rest of the game, and Black is going to have a lot of open play and a lot of open lines. So, really on the GM level, it's kind of just boiled down to mainly this move, and this is kind of the reason that people play the Italian game on the GM level, and certainly on Nepomniachtchi's level at the World Championship level. This is why people are playing this is why people are doing this, is because they want to play kind of like a Ruy Lopez-like position, but they want to avoid all of this craziness. So it avoids the Marshall, it avoids a lot of variations once you play d3. So now we have bishop c5, and then we have c3. So this is actually a very correct move order from Nepomniachtchi. You want to play c3 kind of as quickly as possible. And another little secret is a lot of times you want to retreat this bishop relatively early as well to try to get in this early d4, d5. So c3 right away is correct, and then we have d6, and then we have castles, and this is also correct. It's too early for d4. Another option would have just been maybe retreating with bishop d3 right away. So we have castles, and then we're going to have a5. So this is kind of a new move from Carlsen, but it's not that crazy of a move. If you watch my video on the quiet game, which I point out is one of the most misplayed openings in chess. I even have a Magnus Carlsen game in there where he made some mistakes within this position, because it is a deceptively complex position. I point out that, pretty much any waiting move here from Black is going to be a-okay. Moves like a5, moves like bishop b6, moves like h6 are all kind of a-okay waiting moves. And of course, at this point, since Nepomniachtchi has already castled, it would be perfectly acceptable for Black to castle as well. So just about anything is going to be okay here for Black. So White plays rook e1, and then we have bishop a7. Again, it's perfectly acceptable to get this bishop out of the line of fire. That was going to be a lost tempo anyway once d4 happened. So I know these moves look a little strange, but it's pretty standard fare. So now Nepomniachtchi plays knight a3, and again, this is a smart move. The knight's going to be aiming at b5, but also he's preparing this normal knight deployment of knight c2 to e3, which is something that we will very typically see. We'll see it maybe the other way. We can go knight d2 to f1 to e3 is another possibility, but he's going to instead just go knight a3, and he's going to make it look like, okay, maybe I'll go to b5 instead of c2, and just give black something else to think about. So this is actually kind of smart. So Carlsen plays h6. This is just really standard fare. You know, he's played 3 waiting moves. He hasn't committed his king quite yet, so there isn't a target. But he doesn't have to commit his king quite yet because in the Italian game, we don't have that immediate pressure on the middle right away. So we kind of delay this castling until we're sure that we have nothing better to do. So white plays the knight back to c2, so heading to that e3 square, we have castles, and then we have bishop to e3, which is, it's a good move, bishop e3. He wants to make this exchange, and he wants to bring this knight to the e3 square, and he wants to control d5 and f5. This is correct. So we have bishop takes e3, we have knight takes e3, we're coming in, and then we just have standard Carlsen move, rook e8. So Carlsen is basically just preparing to bring his bishop to the e6 square, trade off a few more pieces, and then just declare that white doesn't have enough of an advantage to do anything. Sort of the same way he plays the Ruy Lopez with the black pieces. Carlsen is basically approaching this the same way, and it's basically the same opening. And Nepomniachtchi at this point has to do something to prove that he has some sort of advantage with white. So he starts off a4, gains some space. Bishop e6, we have bishop takes e6, rook takes e6. And then we have queen b3, b6, so he's forcing some weaknesses over here on the queen side, maybe forcing some weaknesses on the light squares, which aren't going to be terribly devastating for black because there is no light squared bishop to exploit them, but he's trying, you know, he's doing something. So we have rook a d1, preparing d4. This is good. It's looking like probably this is slight edge white. So knight back to e7, he's trying to get this knight to higher ground, you know, go g6 and knight f4. So then he plays h3, he's now preparing this knight h3 to knight on f3 to h2 to g4 maneuver, along with knight to here, along with d4, and we're claiming some sort of advantage. White does have some sort of advantage here. It's clear that white's just a little bit better here. He's got more space, more freedom to maneuver, fewer weak squares, slightly better center. So the same, you see this kind of advantage in the Ruy Lopez, and it's this advantage that you have in the Italian game when you play the slow d3 is pretty much identical. You're playing the same type of position, same type of structure. So queen d7, knight h2, rook d8, knight on h to g4. So I mean, at this point, I think we can say that, you know, Nepomniachtchi, if he's in a must-win situation, I think he picked a good opening. I mean, he avoided a lot of Magnus Carlsen's theory, and he's managing to complicate the position, and he's managing to get some reasonable attacking chances. The problem is just, you know, Magnus Carlsen's really good. You know, he's a really good player, and he's very familiar with these types of positions. Notice all of his pieces are very well centralized. He just does this when he's defending against the Ruy Lopez as well. He just brings all of his pieces right to the middle, and he's very good at timing exactly when he needs to do this next thing, which is after the exchange of knights, he strikes in the middle, and that's it. He's making that equalizing move exactly when he has to, and it's just very difficult now for white to get anything out of it. Although Nepomniachtchi's next move was pretty good. I thought d4 was actually a really good response to d5. You certainly don't want to just exchange everything off and just end up with a weakness on the d3 square, so d4 makes a lot of sense. And then we have e takes d4, and then we have e takes d5, which attacks the rook. So taking this knight with the pawn is off, at least for now, and then Magnus Carlsen continues with rook to e4, and then Nepomniachtchi plays queen c2, gaining another tempo against this rook. and then Magnus Carlsen plays rook f4. And this is why Carlsen is so good. He's finding all of these kind of only moves, and all of these moves that just are just absolutely the best moves. You know, if you look at these moves with engines, the engines are like, yeah, these are the best moves. But, you know, Nepomniachtchi is still, I just want to be clear, like, Nepomniachtchi is still okay here. Nepomniachtchi could continue to play something like, you know, something like rook d4, and then after, say, rook d4, we have c d4, we have knight d5, and, okay, there's probably nothing here for white. I mean, this position will probably end in a draw. Like if, for example, like knight d5, queen d5, queen c7, I mean, the material is completely equal. So, like, after, say, queen d4 to equalize the material, b3, we have what amounts to a totally symmetrical pawn structure with absolutely nothing going on, and this would be a draw. But that doesn't mean that we need to go completely insane just because the game is going to end in a draw. He has one more game in the next day, so he needs to play rook d4 here. This game didn't go his way. It was nothing he did particularly wrong. He played a quiet line. He tried to play it slow. He tried to get an advantage. Magnus Carlsen, just with his experience in defending these lines, managed to equalize very easily with black, and that's just the way this goes sometimes. So he needs to play rook d4. It needs to end in a draw, but I think he just had it in his head that he really needed to win, and he needed to win this game, and if he wasn't going to win this game, he didn't want to come back. So he didn't want to play again, so he just plays a move that just blatantly plays for a win, but it's just a complete total blunder. He plays the move g3, and this allows Carlsen to sacrifice the exchange. The big problem is this queen is going to be coming into g4 with check. And when that queen comes into g4 with check, there's no way for any of these pieces to participate in the defense. So after d captures e3, we have to take the rook, and then this queen comes in with check. Now, Nepomniachtchi, after the match, stated that he'd only considered pawn takes f2 in this situation, and then after queen f2, he was going to play, you know, queen g4, and obviously this was no good for black. But if queen g4, we're coming in before this queen can do anything to kind of defend. It can't come across, so he's completely cut off. Black is completely winning here, but interestingly enough, Carlsen kind of misplayed it a little bit. After king f1, queen h3, king back to g1. And obviously if king e2, we're going to have ef2, and okay, this is really bad. Like, you can't play king f2 because you're hanging your queen, so let's just say this is really bad. So, like, after, say, rook f1, knight f5 would be completely winning for black. So you have to play king g1, and now Carlsen had like a really easy win that he missed, which is, I mean, it's the end of the match, and he just doesn't want to take any chances. He knows that he's got it in the bag. He knows that he's going to be the world champion. So I think he was just trying to find the cleanest, easiest, simplest, most logical win he could find. But the easiest win really was just ef2. Obviously, you can't play king f2 because queen h2 is going to pick up that queen on c2, queen c2, and then you just play rook d6. And that's game, set, match. The rook is going to come to g6, and that's the end of it. There's no defending against this very simple threat. So, he played it a different way. He played knight f5, and after d6, he played knight to h4, which threatens, of course, mate in 1. It threatens queen g2 mate. It also threatens knight f3 mate. So it forces fe3, then queen g3, and the issue here is after knight f3, the queens have to come off the board. Queen f2 or queen g2 is basically the same thing. Queen h3 forces queen g2, and then we have queen g2, king g2, knight takes, check, takes, and then rook takes, and Magnus just simplifies into this endgame where he's up a pawn, and it's more important that it's just a very dangerous passed pawn, and just white has no counterplay. This is a pretty elementary conversion for somebody like Magnus. He can convert this endgame pretty easily, so getting here wasn't a big deal for him. And this was relatively safe. So king f3, rook d2 is correct, and Magnus just plays almost every computer move here from here on out, and just plays with just extreme precision. We have rook b1, g6, b4 takes, I can't really comment on any of these moves other than Magnus just plays really accurately. Nepomniachtchi is, trying to run over here and create some havoc, but Carlsen is basically just going to run this pawn. And by the time the pawn gets down to the end, White has to retreat to defend it, so this is absolutely correct technique by Carlsen. And then now Carlsen has time to mop up these pawns because this rook has to babysit. And after king takes, he prevents the rook from continuing to babysit this pawn. So now we're going to go into a rook versus queen endgame. But this rook versus queen endgame, again, for somebody like Magnus Carlsen, it's an elementary win. He just has to avoid the checks from the rook, and then after queen c5, the game's over. He's threatening the pawn, he's threatening the rook. There isn't a move that defends them both. So that was it. Nepomniachtchi threw in the towel, and Magnus Carlsen goes +4, and that's the end of the World Championship match. Magnus Carlsen retains his title as world champion, and that was it. So what can we say? I think Nepomniachtchi did a lot better in this match than the score suggests. I want to say that Nepomniachtchi had an advantage in just about every opening. I think other than game 1, really. I think game 1 was the only game where I really felt like maybe Magnus was better out of the opening. I feel like Nepomniachtchi's opening preparation, and I feel like Nepomniachtchi's team, in terms of his opening preparation, did a really great job. Where Nepomniachtchi failed in this match is where, of course, Magnus has always been its strongest. Magnus is just the absolute best chess player in the world, and he's just very good at always just playing the best moves under pretty much all conditions. And, Nepomniachtchi just made more mistakes, more inaccuracies, and more blunders, and, that's why he lost the match. But I think in terms of preparation, in terms of the opening, in terms of what happened with the opening, in terms of what happened with preparation, I think Nepomniachtchi actually did much better. But Carlsen did what Carlsen does. Carlsen managed to get his way in every single opening. He managed to play surprises with every single game, and he eventually wore Nepomniachtchi down, and Nepomniachtchi basically just collapsed psychologically towards the end of the match. Definitely right after game 6, I think it was all over. So anyways, that's the final game of the World Championship match, and Magnus Carlsen retains his title. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you learned something new about chess. Thank you for watching.